Election time is here, which means not only will you be deciding to vote between Kamala versus Donald Trump, we also have a lot of local things happening on the state level with a few key propositions, but also with specific measures that may be impacting your local city or county. I'm going to be going over the main ones that we need to be mindful of when it comes to anything related to housing. And we're going to start off on the state level, and then we're going to go off to some local measures in both Santa Clara County and San Mateo County. Now, there's a lot of interesting things happening in other nearby counties, Alameda, San Francisco, Contra Costa, so on and so forth. A lot of them are going to be fairly similar, so you're going to see the similar thought process, but also similar comments. Outside of specific cities, have a recall going on with the mayor. So if you're going to recall, or if you're not, leave in the comments below, because there's been a lot of media around that for quite some time. So we're going to see how those ultimately play out. My name is Spencer Sue, and in the last 5 years, I've helped over 250 families with their moves in the Bay Area real estate market. So all of these are super impactful. Now, the key thing I want you all to remember for this, all of these propositions are generally tax increases. Okay, so you all need to be mindful of that. They're all generally tax increases. And what's super frustrating is that there is never any discussion about how do we use the funds that we already have there more efficiently. It's all about raising taxes for most of these. And so you will have a choice with your wallet and with your decision one way or another. And they're going to all sound really interesting. But we're going to talk about number one, which is Prop 33. This situation has been rejected several times. But the idea is that it expands local government's authority to enact rent control on residential property initiative statute, right? So this is, and to be fair, you always want to be clear. Is it a yes or a no? Because the way that they will describe it, because it's now on the ballot, is always going to be potentially very confusing. So if you vote yes on this means state law would not limit the kinds of rent control laws cities and counties could have. If you vote a no vote on this measure means state laws would continue to limit the kinds of rent control laws cities and counties have, right? So there are lots of pros and cons of this. The pro, let's take a look at this and how they want to write it. The rent is too damn high. 1 million people have left California. Rent control in America has worked to keep people in their homes since 1919. California's 17 million renters need relief. Homeowners and taxpayers benefit from stable communities. The California dream is dying. You can help save it. Okay? That's the pro argument, right? Con, don't be fooled by the latest corporate landlord anti-housing scheme. California voters have rejected this radical proposal twice before because it's going to freeze the construction of new housing and could effectively reverse dozens of new state housing laws. So at the end of the day, when it comes to housing, it's really simple. It's ultimately supply and demand. The question is, it's easy for voters or easy for cities to pass these things where they can have some government overlord determine whether we should cap things or not. And look in those markets to see how really are those areas doing. Like think about some of the places that have the highest rent control. You look at like San Francisco, you look at Oakland. Has that really helped the amount of housing there? It's subjective, right? Those people that are obviously in rent control are doing phenomenally well, because they had these artificial low numbers or not market rate numbers. But then how does that impacted the housing amount or the desire for the landlord to even maintain or want to sell that house, right? How does that landlord feel about that, being kind of stuck in that? They're not going to sell it at that low rent price because the value of it is significantly low. Versus, on the other hand, the other solution is, are there any incentives that the government can do to create more housing, which will also put pressure on prices and rents? Right? I mean, think about this. Why do you think condos in San Francisco have not gone up that much in like Soma or in Mission Bay, those areas? They haven't gone up a lot because there's a lot of supply. You have a lot of options to choose from, right? Not only is the buyer side low, but a lot of those homes, they probably didn't even increase in the last 10 years. So what more can you ask/complain for, right? Like you had those options that are available that never really increased. So that meant if you were saving for 7, 8, 9 years, you could still be buying at the same price as it was before. And that's because they had a lot of developments happen there. But you look at other areas that didn't have that kind of high density situation. Then the demand was, even though the demand is still relatively similar, you didn't have as many options to choose from. So those homes have done very, very well for that reason, right? So that gives you an idea about like this situation. So generally, I'm going to be the same as before. We do not want local governments dictating and influencing things. If they want to participate, they can participate by creating incentives, like making it easier to convert office buildings to residential. Like these are the different things that will create more inventory. And at the end of the day, that's a win-win for a lot of people. It's actually not a big win necessary for homeowners. Think about it. If you have more supply, you have more competition around you. Let's say you live in a condo building that's built 15 years ago, and you have a new building up that maybe has a lower HOA or better amenities, that will put pressure on the prices. So that actually helps a lot of people. It helps. There's more rental supply. There's more homes to live in, right? It actually doesn't actually increase much. So it's really about being more pro building housing. Now, obviously, there's a lot of red tape and all sorts of things. There's a lot of people making money off of these projects. But at the end of the day, that's the real case of it, not establishing rental control, because this has not done anything better. So that's the stance on this. Next, Proposition 5 allows local bonds for affordable housing and public infrastructure with 55% voter approval. So a yes vote on this measure means certain local bonds and related property taxes could be approved with only a 55% vote of the local electorate, rather than the current 2/3 approval requirement. These bonds will have to fund affordable housing, supported housing, and public infrastructure. A no vote means it basically stays the same. It will continue to need approved by 2/3 of the vote, which will be more of a majority, right? Or more of like, I guess, a super majority in that case. And this is very, very important, because at the end of the day, who are the ones that are getting penalized for this ultimately, right? Where is this money coming from? Most of these gains are not from like sales tax or anything like that. They're usually from the assessed value of property taxes, which are homeowners. So if you are a homeowner, you do not want this. This is not good for you. Like, because then the odds of them being able to increase and pass things is way easier, right? And so you want to keep it as still at the 66% versus the 55%. So that these politicians and these funds that are trying to get things done and trying to take more money from your own hard-earned money from property taxes is going to have a harder time to do so, right? Now, so this is similar. This is in the case of like restricting how easy it is to pass things, because let's look at some of these measures as examples, right? A lot of these measures are all about increasing property taxes and increasing taxes. So let's go over how it's really breaking down. Now, different cities will have their own measures. So depending on what city you live in, there will be obviously certain things responsible for yourself. There's going to be a lot of different things about term limits, about if they should stay in office or not. You can see, sure, Morgan Hill's mayor limits be extended from 2 years to 4 years. Like there's all these specific things. Now, specific cities also will have some maybe sales tax to increase, right? So that is your own personal take. I mean, if you're someone local, you may be impacted more, so you may not want that. The question is the government using their money appropriately? That's part of the measures. Take a look at this. In Palo Alto, they have a different situation. So the city of Palo Alto repurposed a 0.33 acre portion of existing parkland into a new road. Well, they need money and capital to raise that to accomplish something like this. I'm always curious to see how these measures ultimately the result will be, because then you can also see, like, do those residents really feel that these things are very critical, or is it just kind of a general waste of money? Because look at how big some of this money is. Should the city of Sunnyvale issue $290 million in bonds to fund general government practices or purposes? We'll see. Should the city of Sunnyvale allow people who are not registered voters to serve on more of its boards? Like, these are individual things from the city perspective that will impact you, and you make the decision and you share with your friends whether you believe this or not, or you want this to happen. Should the city of Mountain View increase the existing property transfer tax to fund government purposes? Does it make sense to increase property taxes? There are some interesting things happening in a lot of cities where they're really trying to jack up your property taxes. Right now, typically property taxes for most of the Bay Area is around 1.25% of the assessed value. Now, some areas are really increasing that significantly. And remember, it's based off of the assessed value. Now, pair this with Prop 13, the max property tax increase can be 2% a year. So the people that have owned homes for a long time, their assessed value is very, very low. So they're actually going to hit less. These impact more of the people that are getting into homes later, because when you buy a new home, you get assessed at the new value. So keep that in mind. You look at Santa Clara. Should the city of Santa Clara issue $400 million in bonds? Milpitas, should they increase the sales tax? Campbell, should they increase the sales tax? And then there will be different ones related to schools. The one that I want to point out the most, I think, is the San Jose School District. So you can see like all of these have their own different bonds. Should they improve the school districts? All of them are always going to say the yes argument is like the infrastructure is bad, so on and so forth. All the no arguments are always going to say, do you realize how much money is being spent per student right now? And what do they get out of it? So a lot of it is like bloat. Like back to it, they're just increasing the amount. Now, some of them will obviously help with some of these, but a big proportion of that is clearly going to waste or going to someone's pension or something ridiculous. Because just look at these numbers. How much are they really spending? If you went to a private institution or you had a private tutor or whatever it may be, like, would you do better than some of these things that are being spent on a macro level? That is for you to decide on your respective city. But a lot of cities are having this. Milpitas, San Jose. Now, San Jose has the most incredible one right now, the San Jose Unified School District. Should voters approve a $1.15 billion bond for this school district? This would renovate buildings, athletic facilities, as well as construct affordable rental housing for teachers and staff. So take a look at this. This is important. This bond is expected to cost taxpayers $60 per $100,000 of assessed property value a year, annually through 2055. Total cost, including interest, is $2.4 billion. This measure needs 55% approval to pass. The wild part is you're telling me that the voters should be voting for not only the renovation of this, but now they're going to be housing. They're going to be those in housing. Like they somehow can run this efficiently, that it won't just be a giant waste of money. Like how are they going to build things when these big developers can't even build things properly? And they got way better efficiencies and stacks. So this is a big no that you should do. But then again, it's your choice. At the end of the day, it's the voters that will speak. But I mean, take a look at these huge numbers: 1.15 billion, $60 per $100,000. Right? If you think about it, the average. Let's take a look. The average house right now in San Jose is around plus or minus 1.7. So if you do that math, that's equivalent to about $1,000 per property. That's a property tax for the average person, for the average homeowner through 2055 for 30 years. So do you want to pay an extra, basically 30 grand plus to be able to do this? That is a big ask. We will see what ultimately happens for this, and if people will vote for that, because this is like a lot of money, a lot of money. And so this is also part of the situation. When you have, at the end of the day, who are the ones impacted on this? From a cost perspective, it's only homeowners, right? So the homeowners are the ones that are going to be bearing this. Now, if you're a renter renting in that area, you can get the benefit of it. So it's always going to be an interesting mix of landlords, homeowners to renters. Because renters, why not? You want to get into a better school? You're not paying anything extra. It's just the cost of the home per se. Now, does that ultimately get passed on to renters? That's a different question altogether, right? Because the cost is clearly higher. Right, you're not paying an extra $1,000 a year on average, right, for a $1.7 million home. So do you then pass that on to the tenant if you're renting out? Those are different matters altogether, but the cost obviously will be higher to own a place. And then you have different things that are in different school districts, but the San Jose one was a big one. If you take a look at San Mateo County is very similar. You're going to have some things that are going to be a sales tax increase. There's a few interesting things that I saw in San Mateo County that wasn't in Santa Clara County and versus other areas, which I like. Should Redwood City amend the business license tax with changes in rates varying with the size of the business? Not a bad idea, right? Like, why should a small business have the same tax rate as a big one? The big one has way more scale. They already have different benefits of owning a place or leasing out a place. This is pretty good. So they're doing some smart things to at least have that conversation up. Here at Menlo Park, should the city of Menlo Park raise the transient occupancy tax, which is basically like Airbnbs, right? Like that will help with government purposes. Now it will impact those homeowners that are doing Airbnb. So if you're an Airbnb person, You may not want this, but if you're a homeowner around there, it's up to you to decide. The ability to have Airbnbs, though, does increase the value of their home because a lot more people are willing to buy at a higher number because of the ratios of what it can generate. But, that's such a small market anyways, of the amount of people doing Airbnb. Look at Belmont. Should they change the existing business license tax? These are all good conversations to have, right? These are all great conversations to have. How do we increase the amount of businesses, small businesses that want to operate in these areas? But take a look at these other ones. I mean, these are all ultimately smaller, pretty much smaller things. East Palo Alto, do they impose a 2.5% gross receipts tax? This is for Airbnbs. Same thing on in this case, it's actually on certain rental properties because East Palo Alto prices are some of the lowest that you'll have in San Mateo County. There's a good amount of people that are renting it out. They're owning it or renting it out. And so this will be a tax on that if they're just rent out properties. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how the investor base argues with that, right? Because you can see East Palo Alto medium rents have increased a lot because at the same time, East Palo Alto has improved a lot. The amount of renters that are willing to live there because the proximity is very good. Return to office is very real. Think about this. Amazon has a 5-day return to office. And the fact that East Palo Alto, Amazon has an office in that location is a good thing for those people. So this can be, it'll be interesting to see how that ultimately plays out. And then you have lots of bonds, more bonds. Should the office of senators? These are all. The rest is, but you can. What's kind of cool is understanding and seeing. Now, it may not impact you. Now, it impacts me a little bit more just because I want to understand like how does this impact a lot of my clients and a lot of people that I work with that I want to buy or sell or invest. So it'll be interesting to see how this ultimately plays out for those specific areas. But for you, you may not care. You may only really care about your specific city. You'll care about the general propositions. And then you'll make a decision. Do you feel like it is a good use of money or not? Whether it's for schools, for taxes, increasing in that or not. But make sure you read the fine print. How much does that actually increase your tax if it gets passed? And share it with other people. But generally, probably, most homeowners are going to be like, no, we're not going to want to increase anything. Renters are going to be like, yes. And so it's going to be an interesting mix between homeowners, landlords versus renters. Now, if you feel differently in the comments, leave it in the comments below. I love to hear it. This is I wouldn't say even it's political. This is more of like, do you believe that the government can use your money, like not even effectively, but can they use it okay? That's the question. And we will see. So leave it in the comments below with what your thoughts are. Let me know if this impacts your decision one way or another to buy or sell. I want to hear from you. See you next time. Bye now.